This is the Hidden Roles Podcast. By Dungeon Masters, for Dungeon Masters. We are going to give you a peek on our side of the table so you can see inside our notebooks and what we've been doing on our side of the screen. Now, let me roll my d20. Okay, check my table. And my guest this week is...
My name is Mitchell, and I am the Chief Director over at Penny for a Tale.
Now, fair warning. If you are a player in any of my games or in
Mitchell's
games, and you listen to this, nice characters you've got there. Be a shame if something happened to them. Alrighty, my guest for this episode, as you've already heard, is Mitchell. And we're going to be talking Dungeon Master stuff. So, dude, thank you very, very much for taking time out of what has sounded like is a very busy schedule, fresh away from Gen Con, to come on this podcast.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I drove 9 hours to be on this podcast. So
wow, man.
It's amazing stuff.
Wow. I think you might have the record for the longest distance drive to remotely record a podcast.
Yes. So, I'm dedicated.
Listen, no, I'm not even home. I drove 9 hours away just so I could say.
Yeah, exactly. So I can take that crown and keep it.
So, tell me a little bit more about what it is that you do. You, people who are listening to the intro obviously heard the title. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Yeah, of course. Most people know me as Mitch or Mitchell. I have no preference of whatever name. But I am the Chief Director over at Penny for a Tale LLC, which has 2 streaming channels, one of which is partnered, the other affiliate, Weave the Tale and Penny for a Tale, respectively. We mainly work with indie TTRPGs to help promote via actual or pre-recorded campaigns on streaming channels such as Twitch, YouTube, as well as podcasting. Other than that, I also write and do a wee bit of game design in the TTRPG world via Necrobiotic, and then the upcoming TTRPG Chew, which is releasing on Kickstarter October 5th. I also do a little art directing. My latest work was Flames of Freedom by Grim and Perilous. And yeah, that's kind of all the things I do. You'll also find me at conventions just helping the indie scene out, selling their stuff.
Do you sleep? Because it doesn't sound like you do.
I try not to. Sleeping is not my favorite pastime in any retrospect. And I'm pretty much kept going by coffee at all times.
Okay, I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
So what was the first TTRPG that you ever played?
My first one was Dungeons and Dragons, 4th edition.
4th edition, okay.
Yeah, my friends invited me over. I thought it was super nerdy, and this was in grad school too. I was majoring in public policy at University of Maryland.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I had plans on becoming a politician when I got to DC, but when I got to DC, those plans changed, as they want to do. But yeah, it was 4E, and the first game was okay, but it was enough of an itch that I had to look into it, and actually started LARPing more than I started TTRPGing, which kind of began my journey
to the dark side.
Exactly.
Or actually, if you were going to be a politician, it was away from the dark side, we could say. I mean...
Exactly. I was going back to the lands of rainbows and dreams.
Oh, man. Do you ever feel like you dodged a bullet on that, or...
Always. Yeah, every time I look at the political arena, I'm like, holy hell, that would have changed me for the worse. So,
that would have sucked!
Yeah, I am glad I am in the environment I am now, because it's a lot more loving than the politics sphere.
Truth.
Mm-hmm.
I would wager that if more, and I've made jokes about this in the past, but it seems like there's always a kernel of truth, because with my guests have brought it up as well. If more politicians played TTRPG, they would probably be better. I don't know. Maybe just because there's a lot of listening and storytelling and
Oh yeah, I
camaraderie
mean,
and
TTRPGs build empathy and listening skills.
truth.
So, um, just the fact that you have to share the spotlight, I think, would be a good lesson for them to learn.
Oh man. Oh, that's wow. Okay. I'm trying to make notes here because I'm going to have to reference this stuff later, and
Yeah.
that's a good one right there. Cool. What? So you started with fourth edition. So you
hmm
dodged the 3.5 bullet. So that's good.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
what's your? Do you have a favorite TTRPG system?
Yeah, I for system really it's Cults Powered by the Apocalypse system,
Okay.
which has a lot of cool horror themes that are intertwined in the mechanics. And I really love the lore, and it's just a very narrative game where you don't feel like you need to roll anytime.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just really nice when you're trying to tell that nice horror story.
That nice little horrifying horror story.
Exactly.
So how did you end up making the transition from being a player to being behind the screen and taking on that, you know, sublime torture that is hurting all of the cats and running a TTRPG?
Yeah, I think the more I played, the more I just kind of wanted to help steer the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so when my friends really wanted a one shot, I was like, well, let's do like a level 21 shot and just see where it takes us. And so that was my first one shot, and I enjoyed it, and I like worked really hard on the story, and it was a lot of fun. And then after that, it was just like running games all the time, from Shadowrun to Call of Cthulhu to Delta Green. It's just something I really enjoy because you can kind of see everyone's enthusiasm,
Mm-hmm.
and you're kind of partly responsible for the enjoyment of everyone at the table.
Yeah. Okay. That's it. You just made me think of like as much fun as it is to go see a show, to see a play, to see a movie.
Mhm.
I have been on stage, but I have also been on the crew, and there is a unique pleasure to being on the crew, knowing that you saw how the sausage was made, but getting to see the story unfold from that point of view. And I guess it's kind of like being
Yeah.
like a DM. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, and then like having secret conversations with the other players and such,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just a good old time.
Yeah. Is there a system that because you rattled off quite a few there? Is there one that you haven't had the opportunity to uh, play yet that you would like to have played?
Yeah, there is one French game called Polaris, which is a post-apocalyptic like underwater TTRPG. Came out of Kickstarter, I think about 3 or 4 years ago, and I
Mm-hmm.
have it. I've read through it, and I've presented it as an option several times as a GM,
Mm-hmm.
but it always comes in like second place, and so I hope to one day be able to play or run that TTRPG.
So what's that system? How's that system built? Is it more dice? Is it more RPG? Like how's that system go? Because I don't think I've heard
I
of that.
think it's a nice mix, and it has been some time since I've read through it, and there's been a great number of TTRPGs in between. But from what I remember, it almost works like Black Void in that there's a unique dice, and then you add modifiers and such. But the modifiers and the numbers aren't as dramatic nor necessary
Mm-hmm.
as in 5e or Pathfinder.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it just had most of the book is lore, so it just
Mm.
seemed like a really cool, like uh, a nice little system that I could get behind and enjoy. And I like some underwater shenanigans.
I can understand that. Um, Man, I might have to check this out now.
Oh, you should. Yeah, it's really good.
Some of the most fun reading that you get out of this. I mean, the systems. I mean, I love systems, but
hmm
man, if you've got some cool, like I have a very special place in my heart for the Exalted system, and more just because
Yeah.
of the world that they built for that game to be played in. It was just like, oh man, this is all the
Yeah, and I
stories.
like the different kind of characters, like between the was it the Solars and
Uh huh.
the Lunars and the Sidrils and stuff like that. There's just kind of different types of play styles that you can
Yeah.
hop into the same world with, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I love that you have the ability to have like mortals and the
Hmm.
solars, and it kind of like they meant it to be like an anime, and
Yeah.
so yeah. Oh, all right. Well, before we start getting too deep into those weeds, favorite monster? Do you have a favorite monster?
Yeah, I definitely think I mean, so cult, one of the ancient or the angels is called Malkuth. And Malkuth is kind of this god that tries to reveal the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that because on its face it sounds very honest and noble, but the
Mm.
truth is very damning to humanity
Mm.
and to our psyche. So it's actually very, very evil. And so such a villain and monster, I guess, is amazing, and I love how it just when Malkuth if Malkuth shows up, it's just kind of game over, man.
Ooh, I like that. That's got a good name too.
I know, right? Like Malkuth.
Am I thinking that sounds? Is there a? That's I want to say there's a name similar to that in one of Tolkien's works, like Malkeith and Malkieth.
Ooh,
There's maybe I don't know. It wouldn't shock
maybe.
me. I mean,
Yeah,
oh wait, you mean someone referenced Tolkien? I can't imagine
yeah.
that. Um,
The TTRPG, we never happens, never happens.
exactly. It's amazing how much comes back to that man, huh?
Hmm.
All right, so we're through all this getting to know you stuff. I feel like that you and I are best friends now, so we can get to the
Oh
behind the
yeah.
screen stuff. Um, so when you're running a game, what are the questions you ask and the information that you need when you conduct session zero? And by session zero, I don't necessarily mean one specific session, because I know session zero can actually last for months sometimes.
Hmm.
What is the information you need as a dungeon master so that way you can do your job as best as you can?
Yeah, I mean, other than kind of the safety mechanics and kind of everyone's yuck or yums, um, the thing I
Yuck or
really try.
yum?
Yeah, I kind of like the it's the X's or what don't they ever, never want to see in a campaign, and then
Mm-hmm.
like the yums, like do people want romance? Do people want like violence and over the top action
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. Like I think figuring out what they really really want to see in a campaign is really important, and for them to be as specific as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also need to know like do they like puzzles? Because I ran a very tough puzzle in a campaign one time, and like most of the party was like, mm-mm, we don't like puzzles. So that was a learning lesson. And then another another one was like I ran this very dark 5e game,
mm-hmm.
and one player was like, "This is kind of oppressive," and I was like, I should have. Looking back, I should have at session zero been like, "This is going to be a dark, oppressive game." Like
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of my intention, but knowing's half the battle. So definitely kind of getting to know the players as much as possible during those session zero so you can deliver exactly what they want.
Yeah,
I mean, you're basically the chef, so if no one wants peanuts, you make sure you're not going to put peanut butter in their stuff.
I love that analogy. I love that analogy. Yeah, if you're not prepared, if you're not mentally prepared for that, and that could be very jarring, even if
Yeah.
it's something that they have no problems with if they weren't ready for it. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
good, good. Um, it kind of just do you do so when you've run I say D&D because that's the world I am most familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
For specific, Forgotten Realms. I mean, I say D&D, and there's a few different realms. But
Yeah.
are you more? Do you like playing within in any of the systems? Do you like playing within the mythology that's already been set up, or do you prefer world building?
Um, For me, I prefer the mythology that's been set up. Now this is different for like Pathfinder in 5e.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'll be strange and say that for the most part, like the fantasy settings aren't normally something I'm attracted to.
Mm-hmm.
But for like Cult or The Genesis or Black Void, Tales from the Loop, Bison, and Alien, like those worlds I love and adore, and I never touch. Like I think it does a lot of great things with, and I might add something here or there, but for the most part, I love exploring those worlds with the players. Um, but I think pretty much every Pathfinder or D&D game I've been in or GM'd, I've made my own world.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So when you're getting ready for a session, and I don't mean like all the pre-work. You know, if you're starting a brand new campaign, there's to varying degrees, we all have stuff that we do. But if you're getting ready for just an individual session, what is it that you do for that kind of planning? Are you one that has meticulous notes that you've made, scripting a lot of things out? Are you completely flying by the seat of your pants, somewhere in between?
Yeah, I fly by the seat of my pants. I usually have a song or a phrase that kind of sums up the theme of every session and where I'd like to go, and that's about it. I used to plan a lot more, but it just didn't. There wasn't as much return in that planning, and so I just started winging it. And finding that a lot of my sessions just came out better when my mind wasn't constrained by an architecture that I made prior to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
Uh,
as soon as the player, it's like no plan survives contact with the players.
exactly, and I'd rather not fight with it. Let's just hop on this car and see where it goes.
Now, is that a transition that you had to make from the first time you started running a game to now, or did you or is that like was that relatively quick for you, or did you have to like begrudgingly let go of all of the writing and planning and all
Yeah,
that?
it was a pretty quick process. I think every time when I went off script, I found it more rewarding, and so
Mm-hmm.
I just stopped planning as much, and then I just don't plan at all because every experiment outside my architecture just became a thrilling, engaging adventure in like the weeds and the gardens outside of it. So yeah, I'm never going back.
You can't make me.
I know exactly.
When you're running a game, do you prefer to be more tactical, or do you prefer theater of the mind? I think I have an idea of where you're going to land on this, but on that sliding scale, one end is going to be like almost straight war gaming. The other end is almost complete, or is without any miniatures, without any kind of physical reference. Where do you fall on that
Yeah.
scale?
I am completely theater of the mind. I did play with minis and such like that, and I enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the speed that theater of the mind brings to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really appreciate that because I often feel like combat can just be like a pause in a role playing experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to speed that up or keep it within the realm of fantasy within our minds, I usually enjoy that infinitely more than minis.
I kind of figured that was where you're going to land when you mentioned that
Yeah.
you got into LARPing very quickly.
Yeah. Or if I can't do theater of mind, if I can hit you with something, I will also take that. So
There is that part, right?
yeah, that's I really enjoy that being like, well, I'm gonna hit you, so I'm gonna hit you with this buffer sword. So
I read a book, and it was called Of Dice and Men, and it
hmm
was about a guy who he basically wrote. He was writing kind of like a history of TSR and WotC and D&D and all
hmm
that. And he had mentioned how he went to go check out because he approached it from more like a reporter standpoint because he played, but he also wanted to treat it like he was reporting.
yeah.
And he mentioned how he's like, well, I have to try LARPing. And when he first started to do it, he was like, he was really nervous because there's a certain idea I think people have
hmm
with LARPing. And then he was like, no, this was like the coolest thing. And yeah, he mentioned being able to hit people with, pool noodles and things like that.
Yeah, like it's a liberating experience, and I got into it after watching a horror movie on LARP called Wild Hunt, and so I was like, this is amazing, and that's when I started my LARP journey, and since then it's been like boffer LARPing and parlor LARP and all sorts of different LARPs. Now, of course, the last couple of years I haven't been able to do so between a little one and the pandemic, but
Oh,
it's something
excuses,
I
excuses.
I know, right?
Oh, I had a kid, and oh, there's a global pandemic. Okay.
The two. I'm a casual LARPer. What can I say? I wish I was as tough as everyone else.
If you're really into
Uh,
it.
yeah, exactly. Like I will get back into that saddle. And maybe bring my kid to a
I was
vampire
gonna say,
LARP.
right? The kid's got a little
Yeah.
baby armor.
If he's so cute, right? Like.
Is there any crossover with what you do and what is it? The Society for Creative Anachronism, I think is the SCA stuff.
Um, no, I've actually never done SCA. The biggest LARPs I've been a part of were the Mind's Eye Society, like World of Darkness one, and then Dystopia Rising. But
Mm-hmm.
after that, everything has pretty much been like local boffer LARPs for the most part.
I in college I ran a vampire game.
Nice.
We were playing. We were in the middle of playing D&D.
Hmm.
And it was at that time it would have been 3.5, so the dark years. And
Yeah.
my friend who was running the game, he was DMing our game. He had the source book for Vampire. I think it was like second edition. And I started paging through it. And I was like, angsty college me was like, this is the greatest thing ever. So I started running a vampire game. But I got to say that the LARPing element of it scared me, and not because like I think I was worried about the people I was going to run into there because I had a friend who really liked going to goth clubs, and I'm like, I'm going to run into those people.
Oh yeah, I mean, LARP is where Vampire LARP is where I met my wife.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
yeah, and she is a much bigger nerd than I will ever be, which is amazing. So
That's excellent. Yeah, it was one of those things I just couldn't, and I, for whatever reason, it was, and I, just because I think it was like, oh, I think it was more like I'm going to meet me there, and I don't want to
yeah,
meet me there because I'm a douchebag, and I
no,
knew what I was.
yeah,
I wore
it's like I'm gonna
sunglasses at
find
night. It's
like you're gonna find weirdos there, but it's gonna be great. I went to a vampire LARP at a kink club. And
oh
they had
man,
like
yes.
yeah, the chains were still like on the wall, and they were like X's or crosses you can like strap yourself into, and I'm like, and there was like some cool music. It made you feel like you were in that like club in the Vampire the Bloodlines video game, and I
Oh,
was like,
that's
this is
right.
yeah, I was like, this is amazing. This is also very intimidating.
I for a lot of reasons, yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, I will never kink shame, but I would say that I need to work up to that.
Yeah,
I need.
I need an amaretto sour and like 5 beers to get in that mindset. So
What was it? I want a vampire. I want a cranberry vodka, please.
yeah.
Um, you mentioned Dystopia Rising. What is that? Because the name just immediately grabbed my attention. What is Dystopia Rising?
Yeah, Dystopia Rising is a post-apocalyptic LARP where there are zombies and such. And so, yeah, it's kind of like a resource scarcity LARP with like people wearing old tires as armor or road signs. I had so much fun with that, primarily because at night when zombies would attack, it would create scenarios where you had to like choose who you really cared about. I I remember the hospital was being overwhelmed, and we thought that that was a safe place to be. And as I was escaping the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
I saw a companion who was hurt, and so thus couldn't really run.
Mm-hmm.
And there was too much light around the hospital for them to be able to get out by themselves, and they were calling my name, like, please help me. And
Oh.
I looked at him and
Oh
I was
no.
like, I mean, I I felt a touch of sympathy as my character, and I went over to try to help him. But then I saw a zombie kind of like shuffling forward towards him, and I was like, "I'm sorry, but I can't help
Oh
you."
man.
So I went over there and I looted him, and I left him there
Jesus.
for the zombie.
Wow.
So yeah, it's
Cold.
those things. It's those things I love about Dystopia Rising. So I ran into the forest as he was being eaten alive by a zombie. And
Oh
just
my
was like,
God.
peace.
So in this situation now, I mean, the setting I love already. I mean,
Hmm.
as much as zombies have been done, I
Hmm.
love dystopia settings. I love post-apocalyptic settings, and there is something that when you throw zombies into the mix, it definitely makes for a fun, classical,
Yeah.
mix. So when you're doing that, are you doing this? I mean, this is LARPing, so it's not at a table. This is at a location of
Hmm.
some kind, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We usually go to the woods. So we pretty much have like a camping ground
Mm-hmm.
um, to ourselves. So we have buildings and like rec rooms and stuff, and they usually do decorations,
Oh,
so it kind of
cool.
feels like it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So not camping like, oh, we're all out in tents in this area roped off. No, this is like where you have like, okay.
Yeah, like wooden cabins and stuff.
Oh, that is so
Um,
cool. Oh, and that is perfect for that kind of
yes.
game.
And they will attack you while you're sleeping unless you like put up traps and such, which happened one time. They burst through the door, and I think there was about like 12 of us. And I don't sleep well
Mm-hmm.
most nights, and so I was halfway to the ground before I was awake.
Mm-hmm.
And I crawled underneath the bunk beds to slip out when I was still like in my underwear. So I was like, I'm not gonna die, not here. I don't
Not like
care.
this.
Yeah.
Please,
But
please tell me that Nerf guns are involved in this in some kind of way.
oh no, not
Oh.
for this one. I do know some LARPs that use Nerf guns. And I think guns were so rare in this one that
Ah.
yeah, so it was just not something that anyone would have.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but I do believe there were like bow and arrows. And I have played in some LARPs where a Nerf gun was used, which I really appreciated.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And because you definitely will have ammo scarcity because you're not going to go pick up those darts.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's the whole thing.
So in this, if you're the one, so let me ask you this: have you? Because again, I'm not terribly familiar with LARPing.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that there is someone or some people who are acting in some capacity as a game master, dungeon master, referee type
Yeah.
situation. Have you been on that part of it for LARP, or are you mostly just on the player side for that?
No, I've there's been some LARPs that I went to primarily as a ref or as a an NPC.
Mm-hmm.
Usually not ref so much, just because I've never kind of been on that side of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I have played like a lot of different NPCs, and we would pretty much just be in our own cabin, all of the like volunteers for the weekend,
Mm-hmm.
and the storytellers would have like these scenes that they would describe to us and give us information on, and we would get dressed up, and they would go play out those scenes with the players for the LARP.
Mm.
Um, and I was a god one time. Another time I was like someone's insecurities, and other times I really love just playing like mooks, just easily killed and easily like scared.
Oh, you like playing the red shirt, the victim of the
Yeah,
week.
exactly.
Okay, I
Like it's
like it.
a, you I think my favorite part is just like working your hardest to make the player feel so cool, as they're like fighting you and getting you on the edge
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. And it's just like, I love the shines in their faces when they're like, yeah, I just kicked the crap out of that guy.
For every great baby face, you have to have a really good heel.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that, right? I mean,
Hmm.
you got to put the other one over, and that's if, and yeah,
Hmm.
so well. So from that point of view,
Hmm.
either as a LARPer doing an NPC or being a referee or even at the table itself. If we were able to duct tape you to a chair long enough to play. In any of those situations, when you're the one in some capacity that's in charge, is the responsible adult in the room.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, right. What is it? What is your approach when one or several of your players do something completely unexpected? And I know you said you like flying by the seat of your pants, but I'm talking about when they choose that one option that you could not have dreamed about if you had a million monkeys typing at a million typewriters for a million years, and they came up with the one thing that was like, what the hell? And it really can throw a game into chaos. How do you deal with that? Because every DM has run into this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like the last time I was doing that, I was running a Lex Occultum game, and I had like this amazing campaign idea involving France and them. It's right before the French Revolution, and like a cult was alive and everything, and I was really hoping my players would join up with the revolution and such. And when the choice came to them, they were just like,
Meh.
nah, yeah, like we're gonna do our own thing. The proletariat and the bourgeoisie, that's their own thing. We're gonna be over here. And so I just had like this face like, what? And they caught on that I was not anticipating that answer. And I think, I mean, afterwards, like the pandemic hit, so we weren't able to kind of continue for very long. But it took, I mean, that session I felt like ended early because of that shift. We had been playing for about like 2 hours. And I think we chatted afterwards. I was like, yeah, I have to think about where we're gonna go now. And I think that's one of the, like, for any tips for GMs or whatever, it's okay to just be like, I don't know. Let me think about this for a little bit. And so then in our next sessions, I just went full horror because I was like, if we're not going to do a political angle, this is a pretty dark game. Let's explore the occult as you guys have been doing and see where it takes us. And they did, and they had a lot of fun. So it's just like when something goes completely in a different direction, and my monkeys are like, ooh, yeah, I take a few, and I'm like, let me try to figure this out.
Now, you just said something that got my brain turning, and you would have a unique position on this. Is there a storytelling intersection, a Venn diagram, if you will, where the overlap is of that, like, horror, whatever genre of horror you really want to go? I always like elder horror. I always think that's a really fun way to go. But if you have that, is there an intersection of that and political drama? Is there a way to combine The West Wing with Cthulhu?
Yeah, I mean...
Well, man, it's a really bad example because The West Wing definitely went out of hand. But you know what I'm saying? Like, House of Cards and Cthulhu or some other,
Yeah, one of my favorite scenarios, and I've read it and I've yet to run it. I really want to. Is Red Rocket's Glare, which is a cult scenario by Jacqueline Brick, I believe is her name, and it is about being interns during the Trump election.
Oh God.
Yeah, and it is dark and horrific, and of course there's politics involved in it. So if you wanted like a micro attempt at that, I think that would be a good dark one to throw yourself in. Another one of my favorite ones would probably be Black Void, because there's a lot of and Black Void is kind of about the survival of humanity when they've been thrown out into the stars.
Oh wow.
And so politics has a lot to deal with how you relate to these like eldritch beings and how you relate and inspire your fellow humans. So I mean, now that you're talking about it, like I think I would love to hop into more of an in-depth campaign like that.
where you
I
have
had the
where you
opportunity.
have the political intrigue, but you also
Hmm.
have this other element.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, man. That's oh yeah. I always I understand everyone has their own flavors that they like, but I like it when politics, not necessarily politics, is done like we know pop culture politics, but
Yeah.
when you allow for that reality within the world, and I think my favorite example at the moment is the Expanse book series
Ooh.
because they've got
Yeah.
some really. Have you read those?
I have not read. I've seen the movies or the TV shows.
The show is excellent. And
Yeah.
they obviously, whenever there's an adaptation from book to another medium, you're going to have to make changes. I completely understand that.
Hmm.
And Thomas Jane is brilliant in the first two seasons.
Yeah.
I can watch his scenes all day long. But the books get very much into the socioeconomic drivers behind everything and how the politics are playing out. And it's done in a very realistic way, despite the fact it's set however many hundreds of years into the future.
Yeah.
But they get very much, and because you start picking up that, well, this is why the Belters are where they are and why they are the way that they are and how the language, and they get more, they don't get into the explanation of the language, but you start seeing these social, economic, and cultural and political boundaries that are driving most of the problems in it.
Yeah.
And then you add in the proto-molecule, which is kind of
Oh, it's
like
like
that.
a whole thing.
Yeah, and honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, that is kind of that intersection. If I mean, they haven't played a horror angle with it, but it's there.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah, I mean the first season of it was pretty dark, and I
yeah,
really loved it. Um,
I wish they had
yeah.
pushed it a little bit further because in the books, there's a part where Holden and Thomas Jane's character Joe.
So
Why am
I
I
forget.
forgetting his name? But when they were on Ceres Station, not Ceres,
Hmm.
when they were on, I forget the station that got overrun by the protomolecule. In the book, it is full on Dawn of the Dead, 28 days later, zombie apocalypse,
Oh, that's
where
awesome.
they are trying to escape as best they can, and the entire station is getting overrun, and the evil corporation or whoever is attempting to actually get everyone in there infected with the protomolecule just to see what would happen. So
Yeah.
you have a lot of things going on there, and it's done in such a cool way that it's not old.
Yeah, and like I feel like they definitely had a lot to play with,
Yeah.
and so it's really cool to see them play with it a little
Yes.
bit. But I wish they'd do more because I love space horror,
Yeah.
like Event Horizon.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
I had to
so
stop playing Dead Space like very quickly. I had to stop playing that very early on in the game because that game
yeah,
is terrifying.
it is horrific. Like holy heck.
And then I've been seeing some playthroughs of I forget they did a game for within the Alien franchise.
Yeah, Alien Isolation it
Yeah,
was, and
and the big
yeah,
driving thing there is the alien doesn't show up in the same place. The alien has its own AI that it's running, and you could
isn't
run
it
the
weird?
game once, and the alien might show up, and you could run it again, and you won't see the alien again because the alien is always moving on its own, doing its own thing, reacting to
Yeah.
the world, and
It's
that's
really good AI work for them, and like, oh, it's really cool to just see that because yeah,
hmm
they did a really great job.
yeah. Well, I'm going to steer us back to the main road here because we got into some fun areas here. Um, yeah, we could spend a whole podcast just talking
I know,
about
right?
that. And I will say I am not a fan of horror in that I do not go and seek it out
Hmm.
because I'm scared of it.
That's
um,
that's a good place to be.
yeah, and I like. I mean, I like a little bit of fear, but for whatever reason, it's like and it's not because it's a bad genre. It's just for me, it's like I don't want to be scared. I think I was
Yeah.
traumatized as a kid. You know what it was? I think I was like in sixth or seventh grade, and I saw the opening to I think the movie is Hellgate, and I was just like, I shouldn't have seen that as a kid. That and the
No, I
I
feel
shouldn't have
that.
seen the Thriller video as a kid. That was, um, But I do like it as a genre because it is, when it's done well,
Yeah.
it
I
is
mean, it's
so artful.
yeah, it's one of those genres that yeah, you gotta be very careful with because it can be horrible or it could be great, it can be
Hmm.
damaging. So you just have to like watch things very carefully.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes a special talent to do it and do it well, where you don't cross the line into being, yeah, like you said, damaging, but you also take it far enough that it's
Hmm.
not okay. You know, it's not, it's cheesy. It's not going to end up on an episode of Misty 3K.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
um, so, in the course of your storytelling career,
Hmm.
uh, and again, I'm going to let it be because you're the first DM that I've had on the podcast who's done LARPing.
Yeah.
Actually, no, Calliope might have. I don't remember if she mentioned it or not because she does improv, so I wouldn't be surprised if she got into that. But she also,
Hmm.
but um, so I'm going to say in whatever capacity. What is a secret that your players never uncovered, but you really wished that they did? Or I'll say on the other side, if that doesn't exist, tell
Yeah.
me about a time when you really had to like do something that the players never knew you did, but it was to help to keep the game on the rails. One or the other. It's okay. I'm just always curious about this.
Yeah, it was actually my wife. I was running a Legend of the Five Rings game, and
Mm-hmm.
it was a horror game, and my wife hates horror. Um, and it was at the start where they were in like this shadowy area, surrounded by weeds, and they hear screaming in the distance, and she went to go scout it out. And I kept telling her screams were getting louder and more haunting, and she just turned around and went back to her group and said, like, yeah, nothing there. Let's just let's move forward. And so yeah, I wanted the whole campaign to start with that, and it was like one of those things that was like, I mean, obviously we continued playing, but I was just like, okay, well there goes that thread of a storyline, but yeah, maybe we'll get to explore it in the future. But we never did. Like who that person was, why they were there to begin with. We never got to explore it. So I tease her like
You'll never
constantly.
know.
Yeah, I was like, you'll never know, and I'll never know either because all I had was like a sentence on it, and then like I was waiting for everyone else
Ah,
to explore it so that I can explore it too because I'm flying by the seat of my pants. So I'm
right.
like, I don't get to explore it either.
Ah. So you
Yeah,
really yeah, okay, that's interesting. So you really had nothing more than just
yeah,
the vaguest
yeah,
sketch outline
hmm
of there's someone screaming and I know this one thing about them and you were going to kind of see,
yeah,
oh, that's brave, man.
yeah. I mean, that's how I normally run games. Is I just have like a sentence or two, and then
Mhm.
I just kind of uh, improv with the other people at the table. And that's just kind of it's been very rewarding to do it like that.
So the question now I have is
Hmm.
and I just got done saying that me personally, I'm not a fan of the horror genre as a whole because I don't
Yeah,
like being that scared.
yeah,
Um, but I do like being able to build tension, and that's obviously a major part of the horror genre. And I
hmm
know that's a weak point for me. Um,
hmm
how do you do that without having all of those details? How do you approach that in order to get it so you can build that tension and you have some idea of a little bit where it's going so you can continue to build that tension but also know when to finally cut that thread and play
yeah,
that line that we were just talking about of not too much but pushing it enough.
yeah. I think following the cues on some of the recent horror TV shows has helped a lot. I think one that strikes out in my head, other than like, was it The Haunting,
Right.
was Us, which
Oh,
is different from Them, which was the movie. Us was a TV series. Um, and it was horror movies, the really good ones have a way of capturing viewpoints and perspectives for the viewer that kind of slows down time and slows down the action and the things that are happening around them, focusing on certain aspects that don't seem important. But when you as a creator can talk about a vase within a room in such intricate detail, as your character steps in, you kind of slow motion the whole scene, and in that respect, you kind of make the players take their time and breathe and really take in the environment of this location. And then because you've kind of like described this thing in detail, they're wondering, is this important? What other things in this room could be important or are important? And then, of course, providing and describing things from a very alien-like perspective, especially if you're doing Eldritch horror, I think does a really good job. So kind of eliminating the, I guess, these societal norms that you would normally describe something as, and just going at it from the perspective of someone who's never seen this before. Like, how would you describe an elephant if you've never seen it on TV or you've never read about one?
That's always the challenge, right? When you're trying to describe something that no one has ever seen before. You know, whenever they've, I would hate to, I am loath to mention his name based on what we know about him, but when he mentioned non-Euclidean geometry, you know, it's like, what the F? I mean, it was enough of a description where you're like, all right, I kind of get it that, you know, I always think like Escher or something, but it's like, what the F does that mean? But it can drive you mad just looking at it.
Yeah, and that's like such an amazing point to bring to your players. It's like, what is this, and why is it important? And just slowing the game down, being okay with silence and stillness, and just watching your players as they try to feel and learn from this location.
So, random tangent right now. What are your top 5 more horror movies?
Ooh, yeah, it is I Saw the Devil, The Thing, The Void. I mean, Us is an amazing horror TV series. Train to Busan, Wild Hunt, Hell House, LLC. I think those are some of my favorites.
Man, you had them ready.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those ones where I'm like, yeah, I love horror, so it's always on my mind, at least somewhat. So yeah. Yeah,
you know what? Why don't we do this? Why don't we make this part 1, and then let's get back on the schedule, and let's do a part 2, because I think there's more to dive into here.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome,
that
dude.
would be amazing.
Well, thank you very much for coming on to part 1 of our podcast here, and have fun, and we're going to continue this, man.
Yeah, I'm having a lot of fun, so I'm very excited.
All right, we'll get it set up.
All right, Brian. It was good to meet you.
Good to meet you, too.
All right, bye.
Well, that's it for this episode of Hidden Roles. Remember, players, if you're in my game or in
Mitchell's
game, and you listened to this podcast, your characters just might get
Nihamoth.
Yeah, that's a thing. We're the Dungeon Masters. We can make it a thing. Please make sure to give us a big old 5-star review on whatever platform you happen to be consuming this podcast on. Please follow the Hidden Roles podcast on Twitter at hidden_roles. And you can always give me, Brian Wiggins, a follow at the St. Brian on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.